We're recording. Okay. The dates on the first page of your blue book. 1865. Let's see if you guys know the dates. What ends in 1865? The Civil War. So that is the end of the Civil War. So time period 5 and time period 6 actually like overlap. I guess I have to carry my iPad because 1877 was the end of Reconstruction. So we're actually going to go back a little bit. End of the Civil War through 1898. A war happens in 1898. It's only it's called the Splendid Little War. Spanish-American War. So 1898, Spanish-American War, which like I feel like a term and something that we'll talk about like with 1898 and Spanish-American War is like the start of like U.S. imperialism. Like this is when we get like super expansionist minded. We start taking over land. We are expanding beyond the continental United States is the kind of what starts, like what 1898 marks. So end of Civil War through the start of the Spanish-American War. Start and end, because the Spanish-American War only lasts 4 months. Yeah. They call it the Splendid Little War. Okay, so today I want to try to get through 6.2. We'll do our best. 6.2 is a lot of stuff. We got a lot to talk about, but I think we can do it. Westward expansion. So, of course, we've been expanding. We've continuously added more land to the United States. We've talked about what are some ways we've expanded so far? Mexican-American War, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. We have Louisiana Purchase, Louisiana Territory. We have the Oregon Territory, which we almost went to war with who over that border? Britain, right? And we drew the line 54-40 or fight. So we've expanded. We've gotten the territory, but now people are going to move into the territory. Now, the 100th, what do you call these lines? Longitude, latitude. Hang on. 100th line, the 100-degree line right here. This was kind of like our old frontier. So we didn't have a lot of people past this line pre-Civil War. What do you call this? Help me. Latitude? Or longitude, this one. What grade do you learn this?
Not before 10th grade, apparently.
Yeah, in elementary school. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is this is the old frontier, where people lived. But what do we know about these states, weather, geography? Hot, but also in the winter, extremely cold. They're okay, so these states have extreme weather. In the summers, it's extreme heat. In the winters, it's extreme cold. There's not a lot of trees. It's very flat land, grassy land. Before the Civil War, people would call this land the Great American Desert. Okay, it was not good for farming. Up until this point, this is where we've kind of pushed natives onto this land. What animal do we see a lot of in this land? Bison. Okay. As we move west, what happens to the buffalo? They die. Do they die because they don't have enough food? No, they die because the government is killing them. Yeah, killing them. Remember, I think I told you guys how they killed them. They ran them off cliffs. Yeah, they'd herd them together, and then they'd get cowboys with guns and shoot towards them, and it would scare them, and they would run off cliffs. Huh? Well, there's a couple reasons. The biggest reason is that the buffalo was the main source of survival for the natives. If they decimated the buffalo, this would hurt natives, and that they wouldn't directly be hurting natives. The government, it was an indirect. Yes. We'll talk more about other problems with the buffalo, why they wanted them gone. Okay, so people are going to start migrating. I also think yesterday we briefly talked about the difference between migration and immigration. That term, it's important to know the difference. Migration is movement within a country. So if you were migrating, has anyone lived in a different state, in a different region? You lived in the South somewhere, right?
Yeah.
South Carolina? You migrated to Ohio. Yes. Drew, you lived somewhere else? I thought you just had your hand up. Did you not have your hand up? Anyone else? Okay, has anybody else lived in a different country? A different country. Okay, so you immigrated from one country to another. So immigration, migration, do we know the difference?
The migration's within.
Within your own. Immigration is to a new.
Yeah.
Because then it's confusing because there's a blanket term of like immigration, EMI, GRAT. Immigration is kind of all of them, is like movement. So anyways, I just feel like that's important to note. But I think one of the biggest parts of westward migration in the United States, people moving west, is the massive amounts of growth in the railroads. Railroads. We are connecting all parts of the country with railroads. So 6.2 is all about railroads, the Transcontinental Railroad. We have these new big railroad companies that are going to be building railroads. This becomes a massive industry. What other industries kind of stem from the growth of the railroad industry? Yes, cattle for sure. We're going to start moving cattle. What do you need to build railroads? Steel, wood, right? So other industries are going to take off from this. It's going to create a lot of employment opportunities. The growth of railroad. Oh, meridian. That's the word I was looking for, people. The 100th meridian.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna get that.
I wasn't either until I saw it again. And there it is, the meridian. Okay, so Union Pacific, Central Pacific are two of the first transcontinental railroads. The Union Pacific is from Omaha. Where's Omaha? What state?
Nebraska.
Yes, Omaha, Nebraska. Okay.
Men's World Series.
Yes, it is. Oh, I have to talk to you about a softball person that I know. That I feel like she's a celebrity. They're both celebrities in the softball world. Later. Obviously not right now. Yes. It all just clicked. Okay, and then Omaha all the way across the Great Plains, and then we have the Central Pacific. But we get all these other smaller railroads. What's NOLA? You see NOLA there. What city is that? Anyone? NOLA? There was just a major incident that took place in this. New Orleans over break. New Orleans, Louisiana, NOLA, to Los Angeles. Then you have the Atchison Railroad, Topeka, Kansas to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And then you have the Northern Pacific, which was in Duluth, Minnesota to Seattle. So if you know Mr. Wood, the football coach, that's his original house, Duluth, Minnesota. Okay, so I do think pros and cons are important. Here, negative effects. A lot of people were building railroads in regions of the country that had very low population. And to build the railroads, you have to buy a lot of goods on credit. And they were starting railroad companies. They were building them, but there was like no foot travel. And they just didn't have any demand. And so those companies would end up failing because they didn't have enough customers. Then also, as we're building the railroads, we're seeing more and more people move west. And more people are using up the land. And they're over-exhausting the land. And it's hurting the environment. Do you guys know one of the largest problems in the plains that you wouldn't think about? It's a bug. Close. Yes.
They ate all the lotus and stuff.
Yes. Grasshoppers. Grasshoppers, dust storms, and the overexhaustion of the soil. They also were killing all of the buffalo, which had negative impacts. And then, of course, as we continue to move west and build more and more railroads in the west, Native Americans continue to be displaced. And we'll talk a lot about the Native Americans in a couple of sections later. But pros, we do see the building of some big cities. What are some big cities that are going to pop up in the West? LA, San Francisco. San Jose. Albuquerque. San Diego. Denver. I was waiting for someone to say Denver. That's one of the first really big cities in the West. Las Vegas in Nevada, the region in Nevada. Cities like that. So, I do want you guys to write down Great American Desert somewhere. This was the mindset about the plains before the growth of cities in the plains. Like before people started moving to the west. That there was no way, it was that was uninhabitable land. But the railroads are going to open up the frontier. We're going to start seeing cities popping up. Boom towns, if you will, which we'll talk about here in a second. By 1900, buffalo herds had been almost completely wiped out. We did get 10 new states throughout this time in the West. And we only had 3 territories by the turn of the century, territories that had not become states yet. So railroads encouraged migration. It made migration easier. It created business in the West, so on and so forth. So the next slide. Mining. Mining is a huge, so if railroads are important, what is also super important about this section is mining. Because this becomes kind of the main occupation in the early settlement of the West. Of course, the first big gold rush was in 1849. If you do watch NFL football, you've heard about the San Francisco 49ers. That's where they get their name. Now, what is the problem with mining, like the longevity, the job security of mining?
They ran out of stuff to mine.
Yeah, you can't like grow more minerals. You can't like plant mineral seeds and then more minerals grow in the ground, right? The minerals are there, and when you mine them, they're gone. So there was not a ton of longevity in mining. However, a couple different terms here. We have different types of mining. The first group of miners do what's called placer mining. Maybe you've like literally done this as a kid where you like go to the creek bed and you take your little tray that has holes in it and you put all like the like sand and stuff in the tray and then you shake it and like the sand falls out and then the cool stuff is left in. Did you guys do that?
I hated doing that.
Yes,
So
no,
bad.
maybe. Okay, I used to do that all the time. We had a creek in our backyard. We did that a lot. And so placer mining was kind of that first type of mining, but that was replaced by commercial mining, where they were going to build these massive mine shafts and they were going to dig extremely deep into the ground, and we're going to see a huge rush of miners to the west. I'm trying to look up here. I don't know why. A super important thing to write down would be boom towns. So here's what they would do. They would strike some sort of mineral. Gold and silver were the main ones. And thousands of people would flock to that area. So a lot of women that are going out to do mining.
No.
No. Very few. So a bunch of men would flock to these towns. And I've said this before, and I mean nothing bad by this, gentlemen. But gentlemen, you're not as wired to be like organized. I would say men are a little more naturally chaotic in their organization. I would tell my husband the same thing, and he would agree. It's just how, and so a bunch of men moving out to mine, they're setting up these towns, these boom towns. Here's what they would build. A bar, a brothel, maybe a second bar, and some housing. And yeah, that is cool, right, for like a minute. But like you have, there's not, like once the mining's over and like there's nothing else to do, there's like nothing else really going on. And so there were women there, but they were not there to, with the best intentions, if you know what a brothel is. Yeah. So these boom towns were great for a second when the mining ended, they became ghost towns. And even to this day, you can drive out west and see ghost towns that just never really became much of anything. Now, people got smart. You guys, the last time I talked about this, I think, was with the Spanish, who sent a bunch of men exploring, setting up the colonies. They didn't have much organization, and then they were like, I know what we need. We need the women to come. So people did start to get smart, and they're like, hey, instead of just bars and brothels and apartments, we need like grocery store, a place to buy and sell food, markets. We need schools, we need government buildings, we need banks, we need doctors' offices, we need lawyers. And these are the towns that survived. These are the cities like Denver, okay, where they were like, okay, we need more than just, it's not just a party. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Okay. That's like kind of what was going on with the boom towns and the ghost towns. San Francisco, Sacramento, Denver. I feel like in talking about California, I have to just talk about the fires that are going on right now. It's insane. Have you guys been following the footage?
Yeah, it looks like a dystopian type.
It literally looks like a dystopian type of place. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I felt bad. Like, we went to the Blue Jackets game last night, and I was like, how am I going to this hockey game when, like, the world is in the shape that it's in? I just was, my husband's like, stop me. He's like, can we just go and enjoy the hockey game? And I'm like in the car, like, we should just be at home. There's so much going on in the world. And I was probably driving him nuts. Okay. So anyways, mining. No, let's go back.
Literally.
Railroads, mining, cattle ranching. That's our third thing, cattle ranching. Now, most cattle ranching pre-Civil War was taking place in what state? What'd you say? Not Kansas. Further south. Where this state is the enemy right now. Texas.
Hook 'em.
Texas. Yeah. Shh.
Okay.
Okay. So, most cattle ranching took place in Texas. The Texas cattle ranchers were taught and inspired and learned everything that they knew from Mexico.
Is that where the Longhorns go?
Yes, that is where you get the Longhorns. Yes. So basically in Texas, they let the cattle just kind of like run free. And it was fine. It worked for Texas. It was kind of like free public land for cattle ranching. But now people are going to get smart and they're going to set up cattle ranches. And with railroads, basically the goal, raise the cattle, get them all, meaty, and then you're going to sell the cattle. But you're not going to sell the cattle in Texas. You're going to transport the cattle where?
Kansas.
Even further north. It will go through Kansas.
Lucky guess.
Indiana?
Close. Very close.
Kentucky.
Other way. Big city.
Virginia. Charleston, West Virginia.
This way.
Chicago.
Close. You guys were so close. Chicago. Did someone say Chicago?
I love Chicago.
Okay. So let me explain this. Here's what would go on. Okay, you have the cattle ranchers. They own the ranch, and then you have the people who were the ranch hands that are actually going to do like the I don't know much about like how to like they would do the moving of the cattle. Okay. Then you would put the cattle onto the railroads, and the railroads would then, and this is called the long drive, they would take the cattle to cities like Chicago, and in Chicago the cattle would go to the butcher.
Oh,
So what we see in Chicago is what's called the meat packing industry. Yeah. So they would take them to slaughter. And then the meat would go from Chicago and disperse throughout the country. So this is like a massive new industry in the United States. We have cattle ranching, which then leads to the meat packing industry, which leads to Americans eating a lot more beef. For reals, that's like actually what happened. So before, people were eating a lot of like pork from like small farms, pigs, things like that. Now we're seeing this massive shift where people are eating a lot more beef. Americans eat more beef, yes.
What's the new industry?
The new industry,
The meat or
it's called meat packing industry. Which actually, hold on to that, because the meat packing industry is something we're going to keep talking about because it's one of the most corrupt industries until it gets fixed. Because that beef that everybody's eating has a lot of like human fingers and stuff in it
Oh.
before it's sold out to Americans, and like rats.
How
That-
did fingers get in there?
Still?
Because as they were like, no,
Okay, I was
no.
like, I don't
We'll,
think
we'll talk about why it was bad and then how it got better. Like when they were like doing the like cutting off of like limbs and stuff, like they were gutting the cows.
Did they find the fingers
It-
before they ate?
No, it just
They
got
ate
put
them.
into the grinders,
How'd they not like notice?
and they were trying to like they would try to kill the rats, so they would give the rats poison,
Oh,
and then
they
the rats would
find
get into the same vat that the fingers were in, and then they would grind it all up, and then they would send it out to American houses, and you would be like, let's have burgers, and then that was what you were
Does
eating.
anybody know any?
Just
good
hold on to
vegan
this, you guys. We're gonna
recipes?
come back to this in like 2 weeks. Okay. Okay. That's a vocab term. We've already talked about this vocab term. So, 2 things. Well, the Homestead Act. Make sure you know that. We're going to go back to. We talked about the Homestead Act as something that the Republican Congress did during, during the Civil War. Because remember, there was only Republicans in Congress, so on and so forth. If you are a homesteader, you get 160 acres of land. You will live on that land, and what do you have to do to keep the land?
Improvement.
Improve it. You improve that land 5 years. Now, it sounds all well and good, but what do we now know about this land? Was it easy to farm? No, it's really difficult to farm, right? So the Homestead Act was great in theory, but there wasn't huge booming success. It did get people out west, but a lot of people saw those farms fail because the land was so hard to farm. But what people do, as like Americans, we are solution oriented and we want to, make sure that we do well. They just figured out new farming techniques. So they called like deep irrigation, where they'd have to just go further down into the ground to get access to more water. And yeah, so the takeaway there is that the Homestead Act got a lot of people to move west, but not a lot of those people were super successful. If their homesteads failed, where did a lot of them move? Some back further west to places like
Kansas. Nope, that's
nope. Denver,
sometimes.
Los Angeles, San Francisco, Sacramento, right? Those big cities. And that's how we see the cities keep growing. A lot of the homesteaders that failed moved into those big cities, and that's how they were able to grow. And here's some written out things of why they failed. Weather. People would leave because of loneliness.
Oh, that's fitting for today's talk.
Oh, I wasn't even there. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so that's called like interdisciplinary learning. Very scarce water, scarce wood. There was not like a lot of wooded areas. And basically like what they had to do to control their cattle was build fences. And if you didn't have wood, it was hard to build fences. So an important term, I forget in what year, like 1874, I believe was the year, a very important invention was made.
Barbed wire.
Barbed wire. Was that in the reading?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Barbed wire. It's right there. What barbed wire could do is keep the cattle, keep the ranches like organized. It kind of actually started range wars because people would put barbed wire up. Some other people's cattle would get stuck in the barbed wire, and then they would actually like kill each other. Also, we didn't really talk about this, but like all of this is happening, and like the biggest job in the West is cowboys. So we took cowboys and made it pop culture, right? Like we think of like cowboys. Most cowboys, though, and I think this is important, were former slaves who didn't move north but moved west. So there was a lot of African American cowboys and a lot of Mexican cowboys. So I feel like we portray cowboys differently in pop culture, but that was the reality. And we did learn that we needed better irrigation systems as well as more hardy wheat that we got from Russia. Yeah. That wheat, the Russian wheat, it was able to survive in harsher climates. So, all right, and our last but not least, actually, I don't want to start this. So we'll watch the announcements. We'll have a couple minutes at the end of class. because this is like so important and I don't want to rush through the farmers. But things were not good for the farmers. And they created unions. And then those unions became an actual political party that actually won electoral votes in presidential elections. So